In the name of Allah, the merciful and the compassionate, all praises and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of the mankind, the most gracious, the most merciful. You alone, Allah, we worship, and you alone, Allah, we ask for help. Guide us to the straight path. Allah has said in the Holy Book, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Tell them to work, soon Allah will observe your work and His messenger and the believers. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ إِذَا عَمِلَ أَحَدُكُمْ عَمَلًا أَن يُتْقِنَهُ. Allah will be pleased with those who put perfection and equality in their work. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. Actions are done by intentions. Thus, each individual will be rewarded by according to what they intended. May Allah bless the Cedar City Council and give them the courage and the strength to lead the community and lead us on the path best for all citizens. May Allah guide them on the path that brings prosperity to the community and allow us to grow successfully together. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay. We need to excuse Councilman Isom this evening. He's not going to be here with us. And so then we'll move to our agenda order approval. On item number 3 and item number 6, instead of Watson Engineering, it should be Go Civil Engineering. Beyond that, are there any other changes the council has from the published agenda? If not, can I get a motion to approve with those changes?
Motion to approve with those changes as mentioned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will now move on to a proclamation recognizing Martin Tyner for 50 years of caring for sick, injured, and orphaned animals. And if you want to come up, I can read this proclamation. Whereas Martin Tyner is a state and federally licensed wildlife rehabilitator, an educator, and the founder of the Southwest Wildlife Foundation. And whereas Martin Tyner is personally responsible for the rescue, rehabilitation, and release of thousands of native Utah wildlife. And whereas Martin Tyner has provided opportunities for hundreds of thousands of school children and adults to have an up-close and personal experience with Utah wildlife. And whereas this month marks Martin's 50 years as a volunteer caring for sick, injured, and orphaned wildlife and providing wildlife programs to schools, scout groups, and community events all over the western United States. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Miley Wilson Edwards, Mayor of Cedar City, Utah, do hereby recognize and express our community's gratitude to Martin Tyner for his selfless devotion to wildlife care over the last half-century.
Wow. Come around here, we can stage this a little bit better.
Sure. Thank you. My goodness. Not bad for a double dyslexic kid that everybody thought would never achieve anything in his life. I remember many.
Yeah, I got to do the grip and grin again. Grip and grin.
I remember my parents telling me over and over and over again, stop playing with those birds as a kid. You need to do something with your life. So this is what I've done with my life, and I'm very, very grateful. I remember standing here in front of the mayor and the city council in 1980 and telling everyone about this brilliant idea that I had about the creation of an indigenous species nature zoological facility at the mouth of Cedar Canyon. And though it's been a long haul, it's been very, very slow progress, but we have been making progress. Rocky Mountain Power donated to us the exact piece of property that I wanted. The city council have been very supportive of the work that we're doing, and you know, we've got the property, we've got the walking path, we've got the program area, we've got the restrooms up there now, we've got the bridge, and Gilbert Construction donated to our organization a 1,200 square foot building. And so that's our next project, to take this temporary building and convert it into our first phase temporary visitor center for the Cedar Canyon Nature Park. So I'm grateful to everybody, especially my beautiful wife, Susan. We just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary, so she's put up with all of my nonsense for 40 years.
I just want to say thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin, we want to congratulate you.
We appreciate you and the support you've given to us, building the bridge, building the restrooms. You guys have been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Oh, and if anybody wants, I brought some of my Susan baked my grandmother's oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. It's my great grandmother's recipe from the 1800s. We've got a bunch of cookies out there, so please, if you want some cookies, please come out and grab some cookies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now, if there's council business, any items?
I only have one brief thing, and I would like to just publicly acknowledge, I think we all recognize the beautiful area in which Cedar City is located and all the wonderful opportunities for recreation that we have. And Councilman Hartley and I had a wonderful opportunity this last Monday. We played hooky, and we went out and we hiked the wave out near the Arizona-Utah border, and it was a remarkable experience. And I want to thank Doug Hall. Where are you, Doug? There he is back there, for allowing us to tag along with you. It was an extraordinary experience, and it just reminds me of the beauty that makes living in Southern Utah so unique and so beautiful. So thank you.
I want to echo that. If anyone hasn't done it, or talk to Doug and have him let you know how to get the permits.
Might have to wait 6 or 8 months, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it is.
Wait 6 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Are there any other? Okay. Then we will move on. Oh, the other thing, it's spring cleanups going on. So thank you to our public works staff and for the community. You had the map of what time your area was. Please have your stuff out by the start of the week. And 'cause once our crews go through an area, they don't have time to come back through. We will now move on to staff comments.
Mayor and Council, Chief Adams with the Police Department. He should be here, but we wanted to give you an opportunity to meet our newest K9 Max with Officer Lovell. And he just went on the call, but he should be here. Can I just check and see if he's here?
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
for it.
Mayor, I'd just like to say relative to the city cleanup, I'm amazed at how well they do. I mean, I saw all along several streets piles of things, and I went by that same street today. Not only were they all picked up, they were clean, they were swept. I was very impressed. So congratulations to Public Works and the Street Department for all the work they're doing.
Yes.
Gives people a reason to clean up. It's awesome.
All right.
The whole little way.
While we're waiting for Chief, are there any other staff comments? This is like the. Yeah.
If we miss Max this week, I've asked Darren if he could bring it back next week.
Yeah, he'll come back next week. So. We just move on to the public agenda till we wait. All right. Till we see if the chief is coming back. I haven't seen him. We will just move on to our public agenda. If there is anyone here that would like to address the council about an item not on the published agenda, now is your opportunity. Just try to keep your oh no, let's see. See here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then you can continue with your spiel.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about the delay. They had a young man with a gun at Fiddler's Elementary. It turned out to be an airsoft, so it was just out hunting. So Officer Lovell will be here in just a moment. His canine is named Max, and he'll have to correct me on this, but I believe he's just shy or just over 2 years old. We received him from Logan Haas Kennels back in West Virginia, same location that we received the other dogs. They've been a great kennel for us. And so he just completed his 8-week narcotics training. And in September, he'll go up for another 8 weeks of patrol training. And so
Here he is.
Officer Lovell.
Got quite an audience out there.
That's right. It's hard to get through. I gave a quick scale on name and age of the kennel. And so if you want to clarify that.
You know more about the kennel than I do. In fact, that was one of the things that's sitting up at training. Everybody knows all the kennels and stuff. And they're like, what kennel's he from? And I don't know. Is it West Virginia?
Yes, West
Somewhere?
Virginia.
Okay, I got that right. I got the state right. And they're like, okay. But so anyway, this is Max. He's young. He's still trying to fine tune his searching. He's kind of the other dog's a little bit more veteran. They're a little bit more slow and methodical about their searches, but he knows his scent really well. He's a little bit more sporadic and spastic, and he's they called him Mad Max at certification, and they would let's see what Max does now, and he would find ways into the places they would hide the dope and tear stuff apart, and he's pretty fun to follow around. But he's really high strung. He has a lot of energy, but he's very good at what he does, and he finds stuff really well. So I don't know what anybody.
Officer Lovell, how long has he been with you?
Since November. We've been paired up since November. We did dope certification school from January to the beginning of March, and then and we've kind of just been buds. He lives in my house, and it's kind of part of my life. I almost feel he enjoys the work to the point where I almost feel like he likes it more than I do. He'll when I take him home, he won't get out of the truck. He'll just sit in the truck, and I'll have to take food out and like set it down and show him that there's food in the bowl, and he's like, I don't know, maybe that's something I'll do. And he's committed to it. He really likes it. He's got his enthusiasm leads him to you can't see his tail, but at the very tip of his tail. He wags his tail so much in the kennel, he goes tick 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 tick, and it actually wears it till it leaks. So he has a really knobby callus on the end of it, so it sounds like a drum gong. But yeah, so he gets really excited. And anyway, if you want, I'll show him. I'll just kind of let him. Okay, so there's a little bit of a qualifier here. I couldn't put dope in here. I didn't want anybody to talk. So I have some training aids that are just like, it's basically cotton squares that you sit with the dope for a period of time, and it takes on some of the odor. And then I hid that in here. So hopefully I gave it enough time that it absorbed the odor, and we'll see if he can get it. So is that okay? Everybody good with that?
Sure.
Okay.
As long as it's not on my lap.
Okay.
I wonder who leads who.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody saw that initially when we came by. So when he came by the first time, as he comes through, he just kind of smells for things. As soon as he gets to the trash can, I don't know if anybody over here probably saw it. He head checked really hard, he passed it, and then he looks down like there's something there. But he doesn't know where the source of it is, and so he usually keeps trying to find the source, like where it's coming from. So then I come back across it seeing that he checks his head, I bring him back across it, and then he's like, okay, that's the place to focus. So this is his toy. This is the thing that makes him happier than anything. He's actually just cut up pieces of fire hose, and he thinks that's the greatest toy in the whole world. In fact,
So does Chief Phillips. He feels the same way.
oh yeah, sure. So we get him simulated to the drugs by we put those pieces of hose in a can with the dope, and then it takes on some of the odor. So the first few times I actually hide his toy, and then he's just going to look for his toy. And then eventually we switch that toy out for real product, and he doesn't know the difference. He just wants to play. So anyway, you kind of have to give away your man card when you get a dog, because they all respond to praise tones, which are really high pitched. So you have to like, go, 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 you know. And so that was a grown man running around throwing these 80-pound dogs around, like, you know, really high pitched. And it's kind of funny because at first I thought it was really weird, and then I started noticing that we instinctively do that with kids too. You're like, oh, that's a really nice painting. You know, oh, look at the cute baby. And then if your kid gets out like, hey, you know, you do the same thing. We just kind of have to translate the dogs, but you look silly when you do it. But anyway, any questions? Any thoughts?
Thank you. It's great. Thank you.
Run out to the car. Thanks for letting me come by.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a real thin dog.
Yeah. He's
He's real thin. Real thin.
So it's incredible the amount of time and training that goes into our canine
Oh, yeah.
program. So now we'll move back to our public agenda with public comments. If there's anyone that would like to address the council, now is your opportunity. Sorry for whoever gets to follow the dog, because that was. All right. Are there any public comments? Okay. Then we will move on to our business agenda with our public portion first. Item number 1, consider local consent for Policy King Brewery LLC.
Mayor and Council, Chief Adams again with the Police Department. I'm here with Sarah, and is it Rigel? Rigel, thank you. I'll let her talk briefly about the operation, then I'll give my report.
Hello. So
Will you just state your name?
Sarah Rigel,
Okay, thanks.
and it's Policy King's Brewery. There's just an S missing on there. So maybe some of you have heard the news, but we're trying to bring a brewery to Cedar City. We've got a property building over by Cedar Post Pond off of 100 West and 200 North. They're working on construction and getting all that situated. So we're trying to just bring something nice and relaxed, build up the beer community, build up the knowledge of craft beer. My husband and I are avid home brewers. He's back there sitting with the kids. So yeah, we're just trying to bring something really nice to Cedar City. I'm from here, so I'm an SU alumni. So I thought it would be great for me to bring something like this back to my hometown area. So any questions, just go ahead.
So you're actually doing any of the brewing or?
Yes, we'll be brewing the beer. So the building has 3 separate little spaces in it. So one space is going to be what's called, the state calls a package agency, where you buy the High Point beer that we've brewed ourselves and packaged. The middle part is going to be our tap room, where you can come in and have a beer on draft. Everything is made by us. And then the third section that's on the far right side is where we're actually going to brew all of our beer, similar to what the winery does. But
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sarah, I have a couple of questions for you, because I'm just not familiar with the brewery itself. Under state law, do you need to serve food with this?
not the license that we're going for. We're going for a tavern and a bar establishment license,
Oh,
which used
okay.
to be the club license.
Yeah.
So no, we
Sure.
don't.
And I'm assuming that with the water that'll be used in the brewing of these craft beers, we've met and
Yep, everything's done with Pete.
everything's done in what?
Everything, I met with Pete and all of that has been
Yeah,
approved. I just got the letter for the permit. And
good. Drainage will be good and
Yep.
all of that sort of thing.
Yep.
Okay. What will your hours of operation be? Do you know that yet?
Yeah, we're going to be open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then Sundays from noon to 10 p.m.
Okay. Then
That's subject to
Sure,
change. too,
of
as well.
course. Yeah, I just was wondering. Then the last thing I would, if you have any notion of what your proposed exterior landscaping of the project? I drove by and saw that beautiful pine tree down, and it just sort of broke my heart. So I want to know what landscaping ideas you have in place for the project.
Well, our landlord is going to be in charge of the landscaping, but we're going to be working with him. So we're not sure as to what we're going to be putting there right now. It was just, the tree was actually dead. And so it was actually a problem to have it out there.
Trees require water.
Yeah.
It's
And
really
so-
amazing how that works.
Yeah, so a lot of those trees that were taken out were unfortunately dead, and so they were a hazard because we are redoing that entire parking lot. So it's going to be all brand new. But we will be working on, we'll have our own landscape up by our building as well, and our building is going to be repainted as well. So.
Thank you.
All right. Chief, other questions?
So Chief Adams again with Police Department. We've conducted the background and there's no concern there. So we approve.
All right.
Any questions?
Is there any other questions? Are you good with this being on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, consider application of a septic system at 3241 West Highway 56 for a self-storage facility.
Good evening, Mayor. My name is Bob Platt. Our client is desirous. Well, okay, West, let's talk about where this is. Here's Westview Drive. Here's Highway 56. He wants to build some storage units in here in a few phases, but he wants to have a small office with a restroom, which would consist of a sink and a toilet, basically. And we're more than 300 feet from available sewer. And so the options are a small septic system. And so that's what the request is. There's no available gravity sewer here. Close.
Bob, are these going to be storage units for rent then to people? Is that the
Typical
intent?
storage unit
Yeah.
project, yeah.
Okay.
This is just a septic system for the office, right?
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Which way does leach field go, Bob? Does it go to the south or the leach field? Which way does it go?
Well, it's very small.
Is it? It's not. It's just.
It's very small.
It shouldn't affect that channel with water.
Absolutely
No
not.
way.
We're
Okay.
way away, yeah. No, it's small. I mean, we're talking minimal use, really, but
Just one toilet and a sink and.
a sink, wash your hands, and use the bathroom.
Okay.
Basically.
All right. Are there
Do
any?
you want to add to that? I mean,
No, that there was a study done by the Water Conservancy District 10 years ago or so on septic systems and the density of septic systems, and it was at that time they said you should have you should maximize septic systems to one every 15 acres. When you look at this area out here, that there's about 8 septic systems in there, and it's approximately 170 acre area. So in that area, there would be one septic system per about 19 acres. So it meets the criteria of that study for a septic system.
How strict have we usually been on that in the past, where that's just a recommendation of?
Well, we pretty much follow that as far as the density of the septic systems.
Is the 300 feet, is that a city standard?
That
a
is city, that's in city ordinance.
Okay.
I know we had a similar discussion when they were putting the units out there by the Coal Creek Bridge. It seems like we talked about how close they were. Would we, 300 feet is the ordinance and they're only 320. Does the city ever put the 20 feet in and have them hook up to the sewer instead where it's over the recommended density? Just asking.
We typically don't install laterals for people.
Okay.
That's the structure and their burden.
I think you had a good question about the drainage element.
All right. Are there?
Could you get under the channel? It would stick out through the channel.
A what?
If you did a sewer along that yellow line, it would stick out through that flood channel, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And that the line in Westview is a pressure line. It's not a gravity line. Right, Kit?
Yeah, that yellow line is just showing the distance from the sewer main. Right. The distance is 320 feet. So
That's a high pressure sewer system.
That's a pressure.
So that'd be a big deal, wouldn't it? They'd have to have a pump. And
Yeah, the sewer in two things. Yeah, you're on the west side of the main channel, plus the sewer main in Westview is pressure. It's not a gravity line.
I think it makes sense what you're doing.
Are there any other comments or questions? Are we good with this going on the consent?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Very much.
All right.
Thanks, Bob.
Item number 3, consider vicinity plan for the Canyon Ridge at South Mountain subdivision. This is with Go Civil. See him. Oh, okay, it's up to you.
Nobody here?
yeah, if you want me to present it, this is a vicinity plan, as the mayor said, for the canyon at Eagle Ridge. This is Eagle Ridge subdivision. We've had a lot of discussion in the previous council meetings about this area. Master plan road that we were discussing goes down through this area. So this subdivision will eventually tie onto that area, and its sewer all drains towards that location. As far as number of lots, they've got 34 lots. Their lot size is good size lots. The smallest is 11,000 square feet, and the largest is 37,000 square feet. This is actually an R2 area, an R22, so duplexes could be built, but they don't intend to do that. So not too many issues on this. We'll probably run into a few when we get into the design reviews and things like that. But as far as being able to plat this subdivision in this area, I don't see any problems with that.
All right.
I just had one question. I understand we're going down the road of talking about the wildland interface. Have we started going down that path to talk about these subdivisions that are butting up against?
Well, that path is probably what would you say, Chief? A 4-6 month conversation. So I mean that.
Just so we're started. I hate to see all of the citizens pay the cost of increased rates down the road if we get reassessed and whatnot. And we've got all these subdivisions butting up. We've got several of them tonight that are butting up against the wild land. So I just thought, I was hoping, I'd heard that it was kind of in the process. We're getting an intern. Yeah. Is that correct?
So the mayor and I met with 2 very energetic and excited young students yesterday. They both know that the city does just the most exciting things in the world, and they are stoked to come and work with us. One of the students really has a background with some of her studies in planning, and we've asked Mike if we could have an intern go work with them to start compiling what some other jurisdictions do, so we can look at what we might want to adopt, run it through staff a couple times, get in touch with some of the local groups such as the home builders, work with them as well, and then start it through the planning commission city council process. So yeah, it's about a 4 to 6 month
Okay.
thing.
No, I understand. It'll be a while. So just so we get started.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Are there other questions related to this item? We good with this on the consent agenda at this point? Okay. Item number 4, consider vicinity plan for the Canyon Cove at Fiddler subdivision, which is still with Go Civil. So
You want to go, Brian?
Civil won't be here tonight, so it's me.
Just tell them a little bit about where it's at and what your plans are.
Will you state your name first, though?
Yeah, Brian Nichols.
There, thanks.
And this looks like it's the first phase of this project, and you can see here in the areas darkened what we're proposing for this first phase. I'm trying to orient myself here.
Yeah, me too. Where are we?
That's the
This
retention
is old
pond, right?
Fiddler's Canyon
Canyon
Road.
Yeah, Fiddler's Elementary's over,
It's elementary, right?
over in this area.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I'm trying to count the lots myself.
2 lots,
How many?
22.
Okay.
They're 6,000 to 8,000 square foot, R2. Well, actually, I think that must be an R3 area.
It's zoned R3.
Yeah, it's an R3 area. So
Mhm.
those lots would be allowed in an R3 area, 6,000 square foot minimum size.
And is this a phased project, Brian?
Yes. Yes.
I noticed there was some questions in the planning commission about the detention pond and some state approval for that. Has that all been done?
It's in the process. This was engineered like 10, 12 years ago, that detention pond and basin. And the same engineer, Mark Brown, is reviving that and dealing with the people at the state dam. And I don't know where they're at that, but that will be done simultaneously with the finishing of the engineering on this first phase. So
Yeah, we don't have the storm drain capacity downstream of this to really withstand much more development up there unless that detention basin goes in.
Right.
And so it's pretty critical that we get that.
So in moving this forward, what do? Do we wait till that is done from the state, or does it go hand in hand, or how does that process go along?
It would be a required improvement of the subdivision.
It would not, or would?
It would be.
Yeah, but so the way those types of improvements are handled in the subdivision process, the council wouldn't see those again. That goes with our engineering department in the preliminary plat stage. That's when they get all the reports on drainage and soils and what else do you get? Prairie dogs and everything else. They get designs on retention facilities, detention facilities, sewer roads, water, everything from elevations to pipe diameters to bedding material, the whole thing. Our engineers take care of that typically with the developer's engineers. And that wouldn't be something that would typically come back to you guys. You guys would see it again after all that's been worked out, after all that's been approved and signed off by staff. It would come back to you guys for a final approval.
Thank you.
anyway, it's the first phase of a nice project, something that we think will enhance the area and provide other housing opportunities and whatnot. So we're looking forward to it. So
Brian, I've got a question off your subject, but seems like everybody decided to build a subdivision at the same time in Cedar City. There's a lot going.
we're just a lot slower. We just had we're slow coming to that. We've been working on this for a while, but
Is it, as a developer, where's everybody coming? I mean, they moving from California? Where are they coming from to, I mean, you think we're, you
know what? We've had no inventory, so I don't know the answer to that question.
pretty much eaten up, isn't it? So we've been in desperate need for inventory, haven't we?
Somewhat. I mean, I think it's growing every day, but yeah, all the old stuff's being absorbed and whatnot, but yeah, so.
Just curious. A lot going.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's about 7 projects tonight.
Are there other questions from the council? Is there any other information staff wants to add? Are you good with this going on the consent?
Brian, who are all these nice young men with you tonight?
Yeah, that's actually the reason I'm here tonight. It was incidental. I got a call about 5:00. Are you going to this meeting? I'm here with the Ashdown Forest Boy Scouts to get their, what's the name of the merit badge, Greg? The community. Yeah, citizenship in the community. So that's who these guys are.
Great.
1975.
Very good. Well, welcome.
Thank you. All right. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Item number 5, consider vicinity plan for the Old Sorrel Ranch subdivision phase 1.
Good evening. Daryl Brown with Watson Engineering. This is the vicinity plan for Old Sorrel Ranch Phase 1. And this is located out by just across from the College Farm on Westview Drive. And it sits right next to Hidden Hills Cove subdivision. There's about 85 lots in this first phase. And it is in the R22 zone. All the
Well, I think it goes into R1 also.
it does. Portion of it does sit in R1. But all of the street widths and lot sizes meet the city standards.
For R22 or R1 or both?
The street standards are the same for any zone.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
I just have a question about traffic. Are we okay with this many lots going in there with Westview and other streets as traffic concerns?
I don't see any, at this point, don't see any real problems with that. I mean, we can run some numbers. That's pretty easy to do to see, but we've just made some substantial improvements to Westview Drive over the last few years, and we feel pretty comfortable. We've got the street capacity out there for.
So this first phase is all on sort of the Westview side.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't go up over the mountain yet.
So the entire Old Sorrel Ranch is the Armbruce property, and the Armbruce own 400 plus acres out there. They've shared with us their master plans, and those are plans that's where they think they're going with the project. Sometimes those master plans move a little bit, but they've been fairly consistent with this idea they have for quite a while. There's a lot of trails that they want to incorporate in their plans and open space. And there's, as it wraps around back to Cross Hollow Road, there's some more commercial development that they want to encourage in there.
Thank you.
Are there any additional comments or questions? No. Are we good with this going on the consent? Okay. That was a renowned.
Thanks.
Thank you. Consider vicinity plan for the Arbor Park Townhome PUD with Go Civil, which means it's Kit.
Okay. This is a PUD out in the Northfield Road area. This is actually I believe the second phase of this PUD. The first phase was built over just north of 1425. 1425 runs right here. First phase was just built over there. It's all done. This is going to be the second phase of the PUD. So that's basically it. It complies with all the requirements of a PUD. They'll be improving 1425 in the front on the north side, and it'll be very similar to the PUD they just built out there. Basically townhomes is what it's going to be.
What's the parking requirement in that area?
It's 1.3 per bedroom.
Okay.
I noticed in the proposal that was submitted, they talked about sidewalks, which I think is a good thing, but zero-scape landscaping. Do you know what their intention is?
At this point, we haven't seen their detailed landscaping plan, but it's going to be very similar to what they have on the other side.
On the other side?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Are there additional comments, questions? No, we good with this on consent? Okay. Consider vicinity plan approval for the Ashdown Forest Phase 9 PUD. Dave Smith.
David Smith, and I'm here as one of the owners of the property. And I'll give you a little history for those of you that are not familiar with what's going on before. It's been before the city council, at least at 2 occasions for a action meeting. And the obstacle that we keep running into and try to resolve is the access. Originally, back in 1996, the property that we bought in 1978 was annexed into the city. And one of the part of the annexation agreement required that we build 2 bridges across the wash out there. And those were constructed as part of an SID, which we contributed to. And it stated in the declaration of the agreement that with 1 bridge, we could develop 80 lots. With 2 bridges, we can develop all the property. So the lower part of the property, the western part of the property, was developed originally by a developer out of Salt Lake City. And he developed the first phases of Canyon Gate subdivision. And then he got into financial difficulties because of the contracts he had. And we had sold it to him on owner financing, and we then we got the property back and we continued the development. So it has built a total of 80 lots. So now the question that keeps popping up is, how do we resolve the fact that the 1 bridge that we helped pay for, which was to be the second bridge to finish building on our side of the wash, is now part of, on the southern part of the bridge, accesses into Ashdown Forest Phase 2. So we can be part of Ashdown Forest, and there's no problem because we don't have to have any more accesses. But initially, we were told, get agreements from the Ashdown Forest Homeowners Association that you can be part of the project. Well, we were part of the original declaration and it was at one point, all of our property was preliminarily platted out into 3 phases, and it would have built out everything beyond Canyon Gate. So that project had a phase called Ashdown 8 at that point, and that was 76 lots. It went through the entire process up to the point of circulating the Mylar, and there were signatures obtained on from some of the utilities and some of the ownership. But that's right when the market went south. And Feathers Canyon Development Limited, that was a part owner at that time, decided that it should be pulled and not continued. So it didn't get continued. But like I say, everything had gone through the engineering phases and there was nothing left. There was no requirements for any additional access at that point. But now, because so far we haven't gotten a deal worked out with the homeowners association, if we can't be part of them, the city says we got to have another access. So then we've tried several ways to get that. We don't have property to develop an access anywhere else. The one coming up through Canyon Gate is one. The second access goes through Ashdown Forest. And the only other place we can go is to go north out through the state trust lands or the BLM. Now, Michael Carter from the university that owned part of the initial land that we have here, because Feathers Canyon Development donated their interest in the property to the university back in 2007. And neither one of us have access at this point. So we are here trying to figure out how do we deal with it. Michael Carter is dealing with the state trust lands to see what we can do with them. So far, we haven't got anything finalized with them. We're hopeful something will happen there. We went to another neighbor, Linford Nelson, had a tentative agreement with him, but then that didn't work because it didn't go far enough far enough east to get past the 80 lot development problem. Well, in the process, I've looked at it. I'm a lawyer. I don't practice law, but I've looked at it. Michael Carter's looked at it. The Homeowners Association lawyers looked at it. your attorney has looked at it, and we're all trying to figure out exactly what we have to do. The city's position is that the engineering standards require 2 accesses. The PUD ordinance requires only that we connect to a city street, doesn't require 2 accesses. And there are some routes that can be done. For instance, you have a provision in your ordinances where you can have a temporary access until you have a permanent access. We would say that the access through Ashdown Forest is a temporary access because we've proposed to the homeowners association that as a temporary use of that, we would participate in paying for their expenses and be a sub HOA with them. And then at some point when the state trust lands property becomes available for another access, they can close it off if they wish. Now, it's already been through one court case, the Mary Cotton case. Some of you might be familiar with that. And Judge Westfall did rule that the property that we have was entitled to access across Bridgewater. Then we run into the problem, if we're not Ashdown Forest, then the city says, well, our regulations don't allow you to drive through a PUD to get to your property. But there are provisions in the city ordinances that the city council, in the interest of solving problems and not creating problems, can go beyond the engineering standards. Now, the engineering standards, in my opinion, are not really prohibitive of what we want to do because they says that they apply to city streets. Doesn't say anything about private streets. So I think that that's the only place where it talks about 2 accesses. Now, the other thing is it describes the 80 lot limit as being commercial lots or dwellings. Well, Canyon Gate, which has been sold out now for quite a few years, in fact, most of it was sold out 10 years ago, there are 59 houses built there. So it's not maxed out to 80. We're only proposing 23. So as a practical standpoint, we're not going to contribute any problems with traffic. Every time I've ever been out there, you hardly ever see a car driving around. It's a very quiet neighborhood. I think the city manager can attest to the fact that it's not one of those places where there's a lot of traffic coming through there. Now, we're not proposing that Canyon Gate has to absorb all of our traffic, and that's why we're willing to go out and find another way to get out to Main Street. And I think we can get it done. And all we're really asking for at this point is that you approve the vicinity plan at this stage. And like you discussed on the other project that's being done out there, it goes back to the engineering department anyway. If you approve the vicinity plan, at least it allows us to go do that step and not lose whatever it takes, a couple of months. And we think we can get it done, but if we have to wait until the access problem is solved, that means we probably lose another season of marketing. We've got we've actually got about 30 lots that are totally finished except for sidewalks. They've been sitting there for for 10 years. And so we're ready to go to market, and everybody's pestering us. When are you going to get your lots out there? We need them. All the real estate companies are calling them up. Other people want to buy it from us and so forth. Well, we want to just, keep it rolling. We'll do our part, but I think the city has to help us out. And, way back when that detention basin was built, we allowed it to be built on our property, even though there was no deal yet. It was because ODOT was going to dig a great big borrow pit to build the new interchange and then have a detention basin right on Main Street. Well, I came to the council with a resolution saying, we can't let that happen to Cedar City. That's not a way to have people enter town coming through a gravel pit. So I said, why? And I went to Bullock Engineering at that point, and they said, yeah, it really belongs up at the mouth of the canyon. That's where you should have one. And that's where you should collect the water, not down all the way down on Main Street. So they went ahead and built it. There was kind of a handshake deal that we were going to trade ODOT for their property down on Main Street, but then they decided they didn't want to do that. So, we hit bumps in the road at that point. We even had an agreement with the city to trade property with the city. That was signed by the mayor and so forth. We proceeded with that, but that fell through. We We dedicated all of the outlet channel from the detention basin to the city as a condition of doing the last part of Canyon Gate. So we've given up property. The trail is built on our property. And we've got an easement through Linford Nelson's property so you can complete the trail. And we're willing to give that up. I mean, we just want to be a good citizen. We want to get our project going. We want to get on the market. And we hope that you can, pass this vicinity plan. It's not the last step. You're going to be able to stop us from building if we don't get through the access problem. So that's what we'd like you to do.
Mr. Smith, can you tell me why there's a resistance on the part of the HOA not to approve the other access through their PUD?
Well, I think that the first consideration and problem that they had was they were afraid that they were going to have to pick up our property that had been sitting there for 10 years, and then they would be getting, the maintenance problems with that. But in order to even get it approved, we've got to bring it up to snuff with the city anyway. So we're going to do all that. And a lot of them just don't want anybody over there. They like it just the way it is. They look over there and it's undeveloped and fine with them. And it's kind of like we're being put in the position where either we got to get the original declarant to bring us in, or we got to get the homeowners association to agree to it. So we got two people we're dealing with, and they got us over the barrel.
Yeah.
So all we're asking is, let us proceed, approve it this step of the way. It's already been approved by the Planning Commission with a recommendation that you should approve it. I think we've got everything done with the engineering department except for access. But we need to just go, we're going to be required to, to resurface the streets where they're needed. We got to TV the sewer, water, pressure test the water lines and things like that, put in the sidewalks, got a bond for all that. We're ready to do that. And we just hope that you'll agree that we should be able to keep it rolling. Like you say, you need some lots on the market, and we got them. So.
Is Mr. Carter going to speak to this?
Yeah, he'll speak. And
good evening, Michael Carter. I think Mr. Smith sort of introduced me. I'm here on behalf of the university. And one might say that we're here riding his coattails in some regard. The university is the benefactor of a donation of property that's adjacent to this. And their interests, such as they may be in trying to liquidate or market that property, run contingent to this second access question as well. There's no development there that's at any state equivalent to what Mr. Smith's representing. At the same time, if he is able to develop the second access in the interest of marking his lot for final, getting that for final approval, the university would be a direct beneficiary of that, because it would resolve issues of access that apply equally to the university's property adjacent. As Mr. Smith has indicated, I have met with Elise Erler of the State Trust Lands to discuss the prospects of a secondary access through their parcels. They have a master plan, such as it is. It's easy to draw pictures on paper, and a lot of times they get changed, but they do have tentatively planned an access that goes from this vicinity and exits into basically the intersection, the stoplight intersection of Love's Truck Stop. Not directly, but that would be the outlet for it. And so that would be a very workable flow through if this secondary access could be developed across state trust land property. They have indicated an interest in this. I think that's probably predictable, because if Mr. Smith and his group are willing to go in there, improve a road to meet terms of secondary access across their property, they do nothing but benefit by that investment. And so we have, if you will, their attention. We haven't been able to pursue those discussions. We've in fact pursued alternative discussions in terms of emergency access, permissive access through the HOA and a variety of things, all of which, while the emergency access has been ruled out, the HOA is still in consideration of propositions, but they show a certain reluctance, to be frank. And so it appears that the secondary access across state trust lands may prove to be the better option, albeit the far more expensive option. And so we're here just to speak in support of Mr. Smith's proposition, simply because we stand the eventuality of benefiting from that.
Could you pull up that Google Earth view?
Yeah, that's what I was
and
going to
show
ask.
us-
And if
show us
Mike,
Bridgewater, show us Loves, show us the whole thing. So I saw
that's what I was
this
wondering if
last time
somebody
we
can
talked about
point
it.
out.
I frankly think that Kit could speak to that better than I, but I think you can see kind of the cow trail roads that lead out of that area. And so what the state trust lands are proposing are somewhat consistent with that. If you take the little hand there and move it.
Michael, there's a laser right
There's a-
right next to your right hand.
Well, look, I'm not technologically advanced, okay?
Little button
How
on the
do I,
front.
where, oh, okay. I'm new to this prospect. Okay. So I'm just being very general, but I think if you see this little trail going through here, is that essentially what we're talking about?
As far as an access road, or
Oh, yeah.
well, I don't think we've really got any master plan roads out
Well, I'm speaking from my visit and conversation and drive about with Ms. Erler, and this is where basically where we came through the state trust properties. Now, of course, you don't see property boundaries there. There are various parcels and various owners, but this, to speak generally to your question, is roughly what's being considered.
So where is SUU's property and where is Mr. Smith's property?
I think.
Isn't that Bridgewater right there, Mike, right below your dot?
What?
Right, isn't that Bridgewater right there? Yeah, right there.
This is Bridgewater. This is, you see the vivid streets here that represent Mr. Smith's property, and SU's property lies roughly in this vicinity. So we would benefit, as you can observe, by any access that comes through this area, as would the other properties.
Would Sitla participate in any of the cost of putting that in?
That hasn't been, we haven't moved the discussion to that part. If they could get somebody else to spend it, I'm sure they'd rather, but at the same time, if it benefits their interest, they may be willing to participate, though that has not been finalized or even addressed at this point. Anything else? Thank you.
I'm interested to know from our fire department and some of our public safety issues about this access issue, because that seems to be really important to whatever's developed up there. Would anyone like to address that at all?
Want to address that, or do you want to talk about the homeowner's position?
Oh, I'm so
I
sorry.
know that that's.
Mayor and Council, Carson Bagley on behalf of the Ashdown Forest Homeowners Association. I'll be brief. I've been here before in front of you and explained the concerns. The proposal as it stands seems to be that this would be Ashdown Forest Phase 9, which in a PUD requires the PUD to undertake the obligations for maintenance, repair, and replacement of the roads, other common areas, utilities, and that's a big concern to the homeowners association. The declarant, developer, fiddlers, I don't know if Brian's going to speak on behalf of them or not. It would require their consent as well as the homeowners association. And the homeowners within the association are concerned, given the size of the main road that they're accessing from Bridgewater and then out to the main street, you impact the traffic in front of those houses significantly by adding this subdivision. And it's my understanding other phases plan to be added on to Ashdown. So the combination of the traffic is a concern, more than, you know, having a vacant space to look over to the north. So as far as the proposal of what Mr. Carter has proposed going to the north and the main road, I think the association would be in favor of that, obviously, because it doesn't impact the traffic within the association. The association has discussed with Mr. Smith a possible emergency ingress egress with a gate. That proposal may go forward. Obviously, the homeowners association would have to agree as well as the developer, but from what I understand, the council has shot that down and said they need permanent access. So our position remains the same of the impact on the traffic, additional traffic in front of the houses. Adding the repair, maintenance, and replacement obligations of the association is something that they're not interested in for the proposed phase 9, as well as you know, any misnomer of this being Ashdown. If it's not a truly Ashdown phase, they would want the name to be something different for Mr. Smith.
So you're saying that the HOA would be okay if for emergency access if there was a gate there, so it couldn't be used all the time, but the city doesn't get, that's not something the city.
But that's what the city is, my understanding is said that's the no-go, correct? As a secondary, that would be subject to a homeowner association vote and approval. So
How many homeowners in the association?
over 230? 254.
About
currently.
254.
And there's the ability to expand elsewhere. So, thank you.
Come back to my access question, the access by the public safety people. Sorry to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to.
Mike Schertz with the fire department. So the fire code, which the city's adopted, in part drives the need for 2 accesses. The code states, and the subdivision ordinance reflects that when we get those 80 lots or 80 residences, that the code just simply says that we have 2 accesses, two road accesses into the development. So that's for us. How it comes about is the fire code drives it. So
it would also be for them. So if there's a fire, there's multiple ways to get out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Subdivision. Yeah, the code states if in the opinion of the AHJ, if there's potential for any single access to be obstructed, then there has to be 2, even if there's not 80 lots. So we have a steep road or whatever that. So does that answer the question?
You.
Yes.
Yeah, that helps me.
So from my point of view, we haven't gotten anywhere than when we were in November of 2016. And at that point in time, the council voted to table it for 1 year. And although over the last year and a half, we've had several discussions and we've gone down different roads to try to work this out, at the end of the day, the requirement of having these 2 accesses hasn't been met. And it sounds like there's further discussions that are going to be had with SITLA. But still at this point, staff doesn't have any guarantee that there's a second access.
Well, what I struggle a little bit with is, earlier tonight we had a discussion on storage unit and a septic tank going in, and we were 20 feet off of a city standard, and we weren't able, or we didn't appear to be able to make a change from city standards. So if it seems to me that if that's what we're sitting at, and I can certainly see the wisdom in having those 2 accesses, I think we don't have a choice, but we have to sit on this and not move it forward until we have some satisfaction on that additional access to the road. I don't know how my other council members feel, but we can't look at apples and oranges. We got to be straight across the board to everybody, in my opinion.
Right. Are there any other comments or questions? We can put this on the action agenda too for.
I guess my concern would be is if Mr. Smith wanted to like take the risk of moving it forward and he doesn't come up with those access, then would the city have any liability if it's all clear up front that it's his risk? Because we will not give him final plat approval until those 2 access roads are met.
Well,
or
Mr. Smith can move forward with a lot of the things that he's wants to without vicinity plan approval. If he wants to go in and make sure all the improvements are satisfactory and ready to go when he can build, he can do that. He doesn't have to have that vicinity approval to move forward on some of those.
Can I have one short comment again?
Sure.
As long as you state your name and speak into the microphone.
Dave Smith. We did talk about the public safety aspect of it. And when we have been negotiating with Mr. Bagley on behalf of the Homeowners Association, we were doing it on the assumption, as we were told by the city, that a second access could be emergency access only, as was the original plat of Ashdown Forest 2. Now, Ashdown Forest 2 was revised to become a full access because the declarant said that was a mistake by the engineering firm to limit it. But it didn't make any difference as long as it was going to be Ashdown Forest. And there was a 76 lot phase that was went through the whole process. And in fact, on one of the screens he had up there, it showed it as, and if you go out and either look on the internet or buy a map out in the entry out here for $5, you can see that the city actually put it on their map as a subdivision, Ashdown Forest 8, 76 lot subdivision. So back in 2013, when they developed that map, they more or less thought we were a subdivision. So all we want to do, yeah, we can proceed and spend more money with, but if we don't get some idea that the city isn't going to just sit on this thing and say, it's your problem, you go solve it. It's not our problem. What we had 2 accesses. The city allowed a project to cut one of our accesses off. And way back when this came up, when the Mary Cotton case was going on, Georgia Beth Thompson asked the question, how did we let that happen? That we allowed that project to cut off the access when we had guaranteed it, when we annexed the property, and they paid for those bridges. So that's where we are. The city does have to participate. You can't sit on this. We've been years coming in here with different proposals, and every time that we think we got something going, it gets changed. Now, the city engineer told us that he thought that the spirit of the law, when they had the 2 access put in there beyond 80 lots, was for public safety. But someone else decided that that isn't what it says. So it doesn't say anything about whether it's a full access or an emergency access. And yeah, you got to have 2 ways to get in and out. And that was what we were working on. We were actually going to, develop an agreement with the Homeowners Association, and they proposed that a payment that we might make them, which the university was going to participate in. And then they said, oh, well, that ain't going to work. We can't keep coming back here. We work on things that are supposed to solve the problem. And it seems like about the time we get to a meeting, it changes. And we're not going to do that anymore. We're either going to have everybody try to cooperate to solve the problem, or we have no choice but to do, as the city attorney suggested, let's just go to court. And we're happy to do that.
Well, you do agree that if it's a fully developed subdivision with 80 lots, that it does need 2 accesses, correct?
Well, that's not exactly true, because...
Well, that's what you just said.
No, I'm just saying, they're saying because Canyon Gate is 80 lots, and we're totally separate. We're not part of Canyon Gate.
Okay.
We're a separate one. If you read it literally, we should be able to build 80 lots with 1 access. And we could develop the one down into Canyon Gate. And that would give us 1 access, and then the second access would go out north. We don't have to have anything if we can go across Bridgewater, because the Ashdown Forest community has 2 accesses.
Sure, I understand that.
So we don't have to do anything if we go that route. But, we've got reluctant cooperation from, people have different reasons. And a lot of them are they just don't want anything next door.
Sure.
And when it's dumped in our lap to what are we supposed to do? We can't condemn property like the city can. We can't force a neighbor to give us access. The city can do it. The city also could, you have a provision in your ordinance that says when a PUD is developed, it can be required to provide a city street to access adjoining property. Now, Ashdown Forest 2 was allowed to develop without that. It was allowed to develop without giving us access to our side. Yeah, we can be part of Ashdown Forest, but nobody wants us to be part of Ashdown Forest. So what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are. We're just asking, there are ways that you can solve it, or we can go to court. And I don't think it solves anybody's, it's not in anybody's interest to go have a judge who's already told us that we have the right to access. He'll probably say, why are you coming back here? I already made that decision. So just
let me ask
look at it.
one question.
Sure.
If you would have continued on when this was approved, back when it was approved as phase 8 of Fiddlers,
Right.
if the ownership wouldn't have changed and you continued on as Fiddlers, we wouldn't have this issue, right?
Right.
So did it come up not by any action or inaction of the city, but by the fact that you guys split your partnership, divided the land, and took access to that portion that should have been phase 8? Am
Well,
I understanding that correctly?
Well, that's correct in one sense. But the other part of it is that our family owned 80% of that property. Feathers Canyon Development had 20%. Actually, it started out with Twin Oaks Inc., which was, at that point, was Frank Nichols and Steve Seavey. And they were the agents that sold us the property. So they had 20% interest. And then when Ashdown Forest was developed, we didn't know it was going to be Ashdown Forest and it was going to cut off the bridge because we didn't get notice. Now, maybe this, and I know the city doesn't send out notice, they have the engineers send it out. So I suppose the engineers figured, well, we're doing this for somebody that's a part owner in the property, so we don't have to give notice to the rest of them. So we're sitting there, we don't know that we're getting cut off until afterwards. So we had no notice, we didn't know that we were going to get cut off. And we think the city had a responsibility to do something about the fact that what's going to happen on the other side. Now, I do know that Bullock Brothers designed all of our property to be Ashdown Forest without our knowledge. And so, yeah, it's going to be a mess if we go back to court, and I don't want to go there. I just want to have some simple solution to let us put 23 lots out there that's not going to impact any problems. And the homeowners association will probably come to some agreement with us so that we'll participate and put some money their direction to help pay for the part of the street that we used. But of course, if they think they can come here and say no along with the city, they're going to say no. So then we have to wind up in court. That doesn't make sense.
Did you ever, last time we talked about this, I'd asked if you'd ever, have you approached Sitla to see if they would participate in the road, the cost of a road?
Well, I haven't talked directly with him because Michael Carter's been the one that's done that. I wasn't in town at the time, and he went out on the property with the lady from Sitla.
Just seems like between SU and you and Sitla, that road would make their property quite valuable to do that. That might be a solution.
Well, it might be, but it's a government agency, and they're not worried about doing anything next week or next month or next year. Yep. And like I say, we've been dealing with this for.
Well, we talked about a year ago when we brought this up a year ago about talking to them, and so it's never happened. Then sounds like. Well,
the conversations have gone on, but there's been no response from them that they're willing to do it. I know they look for development partners. Normally, is what they do with their property, right. And maybe until they get somebody that's interested in doing something with them, they just don't have any real incentive to press forward. And I know they did say they wanted it to be done according to the master plan, and the IBI master plan does go basically where Michael was pointing to it. And out near Love's Truck Stop, where they park across the street there, that's where we connect up.
And you mentioned earlier that Mr. Nelson, Linford Nelson, that road wouldn't go far enough east. Is that what you indicated, or right. Okay?
Yeah, it still has to go through the state trust lands to get to our property.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this will go on the action agenda for next week. Okay. Item number 8, consider final plat approval for the Fields Phase 2 PUD.
Daryl Brown, Watson Engineering, just bringing the final plat through for final approval. The construction drawings for this project have been approved with the engineering department. And phase one, so this is located on 1425, between 1425 North and 1325 North. Phase one of this PUD is just north of this property and is almost complete with construction. But we're just coming through the process to get final approval for the final plat.
Is this just north of Dr. Delcour's? Where is this located?
It's west of.
West.
Yep. It's just west of the Beehive. It's Beehive Homes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That's the new one they built, what, a year or so ago? The
Yes,
Beehive?
that's correct.
So on the legal side, the fees and letter of credit have been received. The CCNRs have already been written for the first phase. They're just going to adopt in the second phase, so everything should be fine there as well.
Well, I'm curious to know what's been the time frame, if anyone knows this, between when it was got a positive recommendation from Planning Commission to where we are tonight.
It's been a few months. I don't know exactly the time frame, but
okay, but several months. Is that mostly because of the bonding issues and the CCNRs, or?
no. So after vicinity plan, we went through the process to complete the construction drawings, and that was dealt with the city engineering department.
Mm-hmm.
And once that is approved, then we came through the city process for the final plat.
Okay, thank you.
I could find that date and email you.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions with this one? Good with this going on consent? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll move to our staff portion with item number 9, consider proposals for engineering services for the wastewater treatment plant return effluent reuse feasibility study.
Jonathan Stathis, City Engineering Department. I'm sure you're all familiar with this project. We went out for proposals and we received 2 proposals back. The first proposal was from Corolla Engineers, and then we also received a proposal from Alpha Engineering. And city staff reviewed the proposals, and Corolla Engineers received the highest score on the evaluation. Corolla's teaming up with Ensign Engineering and Watson Engineering. Those are both local companies here in town. And we feel like they have the expertise to be able to do a good job on this study for the city. As far as the funding, originally we had estimated the study to be about 100,000. You can see that the proposals came in a little bit higher than that. We're proposing a cost of about 120,000 to fully complete the study. The project's currently not funded. There's a few options that we could look at. I talked to Jason Norris before. I'm not sure if I think he's at a conference this week, but said one option would be to use money from the fund balance of both the water division and the treatment plant, or we could wait and just include it in next year's budget. We're also going to be looking at going for some outside funding, possibly from some state agencies. We've had some discussions with the Division of Water Quality, and then there's also some funding available through Division of Water Resources. And as part of the study, the consultant will be helping the city to file those funding applications, and so there is a possibility of getting some outside funding as well. So that's kind of where we're at with it. So there's a few things that the council probably needs to look at as far as the funding goes, if it is approved.
Is there a problem on city side as far as moving it forward now and doing a budget revision as opposed to like waiting so we can get going on it? Or
The timing of the budget revision typically this time of year corresponds with the timing of the approval of the next fiscal year's budget. So I don't know how much that would accelerate things.
Okay.
If the council wants to get it moving right away and you want us to do a budget revision, we could do one. It would be, you have to give public notice. So it'd be mid-May before we could do it. The earliest possible.
I'd be in favor of that. The other thing I'd like to see us do is, no matter what we do, we've got to upgrade that water from a type 2 type 1. Is there a reason why we can't move forward with? Don't we have money in that fund to go forward with a sand filter? And
it might not be as simple as just adding a sand filter. It might also require adding another clarifier.
Oh.
So now we've increased not only the cost but the scope of the design to add that. I think it would be a third clarifier.
Yeah.
Corey, have you looked at that?
Corey Dow, Crollo Engineers. So our understanding of the scope of the study, upgrading type 1 would be an alternative. There were also other things that needed to be looked at. Part of the scope in the RFP stated to look at options for groundwater recharge. That is currently not regulated in the state of Utah, so that could potentially be even higher than type 1.
We were told by DWQ, weren't we, that type 1 could be recharged, I believe. Didn't they tell us that in that meeting when they came down? That's what they said when they were here.
Don't know that's been done in the state before. But again, these are things that are part of the scope of the study to define further so that we can give you a final recommendation of what would be most feasible. But
for example, one of the things that both applicants or both companies included within their proposals was a different concept of having some sort of secondary plant built somewhere closer to this end of the valley that would just, and I'll get the terminology wrong, so please forgive me.
Yeah,
siphon off or scalp off the water and send the solids with enough water to get them down to the main plant. So that would change the equation as far as what you're whether or not we needed to go to type 1 at the main plant or not.
your biggest cost, regardless of what you do, is going to be the cost of moving water. So installing a linear pipeline pumping cost. So to offset that, we propose looking at different options for a decentralized approach where you could pull directly off the sewer and use it for a localized location. That way, the money you're saving from installing a linear pipeline and cost for pumping could be put into additional treatment if needed to go that route.
So would that additional plant, that satellite plant, it'd have to bring it to type 1, whatever we did, right? At least. Or higher.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
Or depending, or it could be a decentralized application for a type of irrigation that's not likely to come in contact with human contact.
And that's why those pivots out by the Enoch Graben area, it wouldn't. I think that's why the type 1 would work in those pivots, because it wouldn't. There's hardly anybody out there. But so how does that affect the sewer plant if you cut the liquids down and just have enough to get the solids? How does that affect the operation of the sewer plant? Does it
just depends on the size of the decentralized application? If you're looking at cutting, say, from 500,000 gallons a day to 1 million gallons a day, the plant will still be able to operate. The idea is you separate the solids in the scalping plant and still put those into the sewer, and it makes its way down to the plant. Might need to be small adjustments in the existing plant to optimize the change, but it's still manageable.
Does it affect the nitrate revision or upgrade we did recently? Does it affect any of that?
Don't believe so, no. Okay. It's pretty common practice in other areas.
But all of that would come out in the study. So
what kind of time frame are we looking at for the study?
Still to be determined.
Yeah.
The proposal, we had about a 4-month time frame.
Can you tell me regarding the funding, what is the difference between what the cost came in for and what available funds we do have as opposed to what money we'd need to find?
We would have the money. It's just a matter of which budget year it comes out of.
The council's, if you want us to start revision process and put it into this current fiscal year, we can do that. It'll take a couple weeks to advertise that and get it moving.
We've been talking about this for so long. I think we ought to move forward and get going as quick as we can.
So it would
That's my
either
opinion.
be basically in May or in June.
Or in July, right?
Or June, because June's when our normal budget revision would be. So it would be sometime in May or with the June budget revision.
And I have one other question, and it's purely in ignorance on my part, so bear with me, Jonathan. Or you, what are the responsibilities of Ensign and Watson, and why are they teaming up? Is it too large for one firm, or are we just trying to spread the jewels? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to understand this.
So the idea for teaming with Ensign and Watson, Ensign has a intimate knowledge of the local aquifer, so we would lean on them for their knowledge as far as how the aquifer is being operated.
Okay. Ensign does the engineering work for the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District.
Yeah, so existing knowledge of water quality, local infrastructure, we could lean on them for what's existing and how we can utilize that. Also, Watson Engineering, they have intimate knowledge on the geotechnical conditions. So if we are looking at some type of groundwater recharge, we'll have an understanding of the geology and how it would interact with different water qualities. That way, right now, you wouldn't have to spend the money drilling, a few boreholes to get an understanding, things like that. So we're leaning on their knowledge to give a high level understanding of what's going on. And us as Corolla, we didn't have that intimate knowledge.
Right.
So you don't have to recreate the wheel. You
no, that's great. I just was wondering the reason behind it, but that helps clarify it.
Trying to be as efficient as possible for the
Sure.
city, so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So are we good with this going on the
Yes
consent to award it? Is there anything else you want to? Hold on.
Well,
Is there anything?
I just had one other thing. We still haven't. We'll still need to do a written contract. So we'll try to have that ready for next
week.
Wednesday.
Then it will go. Let's have it go on the action.
Good evening, Tom Jett. I'd just like to say, and I've said this in the past, this type of forward-thinking attitude for all involved in this study and all involved in making this happen is going to make the difference between a successful future for Cedar City or a not successful future for Cedar City from an economic and from a quality of life standpoint. This is a game changer. Completely support it as a citizen. I think anybody that can understand this, what we're trying to do to maximize our water and get a second, I could say, use the term bite at the apple, is absolutely fantastic. We should have been doing this 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but now we have in the last few years, we've had the leadership and the direction that help make this happen and realize that this is the difference between success and failure for this community. So thank you for doing this.
One thing I hope we look at is really focus on using this water in pivots, because if the farmers idle their wells and we use that water in the pivots, you're basically recharging the aquifer without the risk of polluting it, because you're just idling those wells and not pumping the water. So that seems awful logical to me to really focus on that. Not, if we, and of course we wouldn't risk polluting the aquifer because the division water quality would require us to bring that water up to a standard that was safe. But still, that seems logical to me. And Cedar City's got, what is it, 3 or 4 wells out there, Kid, in that area?
In Enoch area.
In Enoch area. So we're pulling as much water out of that area as Enoch is, almost exactly the same. And so it seems politically that it makes sense that we help that area because we're using as much water as they are. So, and it's so close to the pivots that are there. It just makes sense to me that we come down 2300 east under those power lines and try that. I mean, it seems like that would be, I know it's not simple, but it's a great option, I think.
It's important.
And part of the plan is to sit down with the project team, city members included, and hash out the points that are most important to the city so that we can come up with a solution that's the most cost effective, as well as hitting any other important point that the city wants us to look at. The one thing I would say to that is that seems like a simple approach. Whether or not the farmers legally would have to stop using the rights that they have, that gets a little fuzzy. Even if they didn't need to, legally, do they have to stop using it? Is the part you got to look at when it comes to groundwater rights and things like that.
I would hope they would want to participate based on their aquifer and how serious it with the subsidence they've had out there and different things. I would hope they would want to participate. And it seems to me like, what I'd be really interested in is if we tried that, and if we end up bringing that line clear to Fiddlers to do a secondary pond or whatever for a secondary system there, if it's on the way anyway, we're not out anything to try it. That's what I'm curious. If that would be the route we'd go anyway,
We're excited to take a look at it. So thanks.
Thank you.
One of the benefits of the study, whatever we do is going to cost a lot of money.
Right.
So along the way, when we're meeting with the consultant to develop ideas, it's my intention to invite representatives from the county and Enoch and the Water Conservancy District to come with us. So we can show them what we're doing. And later when we have a dollar amount for whatever the study's going to say, we can go back to them and solicit their participation financially in whatever the solution is.
Enoch, I talked to Rob Dotson, their city manager, and he said they're all for chipping in and contributing. So isn't it 2,800 acre feet we're putting out with effluent? Isn't that about what it is?
Yeah, plus or minus.
So that's nearly half of our deficit. So it's a big deal.
All right. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Item number 10, consider disposal of city property.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Chief Adams with the Police Department. You have this in your packet there. Just wanted to kind of go over this sheet to give some detail. We currently have 2 Thompson 45 caliber submachine guns stored in our evidence room. We've had them for a long time, and it's taken quite a while to go through the process. I think for some time they sat with the thought that maybe there could be some use. But the more we've looked at that, they're of no use to us. And so over the last several months, we've gone through the process to work with the ATF and find out if there's a way to get those surplused and moved on. One of those guns was obtained from a gentleman in our community on March 5th, 1957. What's that?
That was a while ago.
That's right. The previous owner surrendered the firearm to us as he did not want to have it in his possession. It was then surrendered to then Chief of Police Tony Lambert. This particular weapon is transferable according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms if it is transferred or sold to a Class 3 firearms dealer, who then is permitted to sell it to a qualified citizen. The current high bid for this gun was $18,300 by John Thedford with NFA sales out of Naples, Florida. The second firearm is the same brand, model, and caliber, and it was actually traded to our department on December 26, 1984 by then Police Chief Wayne Townsend from Parowan to then Police Chief Dennis Anderson with Cedar in exchange for a surplus Remington 308 caliber rifle with scope. It's interesting to go back and find this information. The ATF actually had this. We didn't know this. And we can only assume that perhaps Cedar City needed a sniper rifle and had no need for the submachine gun. And so that trade was made at that time.
I think he's already made that trade.
Yes, I'm sure.
Based on the value of that gun.
This particular weapon is non-transferable, which means it can only be transferred or sold to a Class 3 dealer for a sample that can only be sold to another law enforcement agency or another Class 3 dealer. And for that reason, the bid on that was substantially lower at $7,100 by Ruben Mendiola Jr. with Deal Inferna Incorporated out of Miami. So we want to get these declared surplus and honor these high bids from this auction. One thing that we found, and I think the timing is good, over the last 2 years, I've asked my staff to audit their areas of operation to make sure that we're engaged in best practice and that we're not doing things, that are outside the realm of what we should be and doing them at the highest quality. And one area that we found that is lacking is our evidence. We've worked on that for the last couple of years. Sergeant Robinson and Eric Grimm have done a great job the last 8 months trying to identify deficits. Evidence, as you know, can be highly litigious, and it's important that we're at the top of the scale when we're trying to make sure we intake, retain, and dispose of that properly. We have got a room with a lot of evidence, thousands and thousands of pieces of evidence in there. And it's a daunting task to go through each day and take evidence in for one person, and then to try and take evidence and write letters and get correspondence from city and county attorney to make sure that those cases have then been adjudicated and we can get rid of that. And so we would like to use this money and look at upgrading some technology, so hardware, software, scanning devices, things that we can improve that operation to make sure we get that evidence in and out quicker. We're also looking at beefing up the security on some electric locks. We currently have those in our building now, but this will allow higher accountability, and we'll log people in and out to make sure that we can increase and improve our operations. So I'd leave that with you for any questions you may have.
Sounds like
go ahead. No, go
sounds
ahead.
like a great move to me.
How did you get the bidders? How did they come about?
So Lieutenant Miller took care of that and worked with the ATF. I'm not exactly sure how
Okay, so
that
it came
to
through
be,
the ATF.
but yeah, you put it out. They give you a list of Class 3 dealers, and you put it out, and people can bid. You publicly advertise that, and I think there were one or two, perhaps in the community, that bid as well. I know one of our pawn shops, they're a Class 3 dealer, and it bid as well, but it was lower.
Did Tom bid on them?
Tom? No.
He
All
wants
right,
that, he wants that sniper.
we good for this to go on the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Consider proposals for the cemetery columbarium project.
Spenceman probably is owned by Bonnie and Clyde.
Good evening, Trevor McDonald, City Engineering Department. The city cemetery is desirous of a columbarium garden. We have a competitive process, the RFP process, to send out requests for proposals on what we thought we needed as basic criteria, but we didn't know exactly what we wanted, so we figured the request for proposal process was appropriate. 2 vendors in Columbaria responded to that RFP. It's Cold Spring and Eichhoff Columbaria. And the evaluation committee rated Cold Spring, they got better points than Eichhoff, and we're presenting to you the opportunity to use Cold Spring as a columbarium vendor for a future columbarium garden project that we want to bid out in the next couple months. Are there any questions? This is up on the slide here. This is the proposed design of that columbarium for those that don't know what a columbarium is or what design we were going with to ease some nerves.
What are the materials? That was one of my questions for the proposed design. I mean, is that granite? What is it?
It is granite. I think both pieces are granite.
Both pieces are granite.
If I remember right. So the dark faces would be a polished granite, and then the bottom base and the top header would be a rougher cut.
And it looks to me like the way it was designed, or at least what's being proposed right now, it could be expanded on.
It would be done in phases.
Right.
So this would be phase 1, and then
You got the next picture.
depending on how it.
There's another picture, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another picture, and it's all in your
This
packet.
is the
So that could be the full build out or something like that. But we wanted one where it could be done in phases.
Yeah.
Part of the evaluation went to taking into account their proposed design, their layout, and how well it would look as just phase 1. I mean, what if we don't want phase 2 and 3? And we think the evaluation committee, I think together thought that the completed product at the end of each phase looked better with Cold Spring. That was one of the points. That was one of the.
And how well it looks with the existing cemetery we have and the surroundings and everything else to harmonize.
Remind me of where it is. Is it right behind the new building?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, just west of that.
You'd have to do some
West of
dirt work.
Ron's building.
Councilman Adams was part of that evaluation committee. Yes.
All right.
I think it's great.
Any other comments, questions? Can we move the consent? Wonderful. Okay, item number 12, consider an ordinance amending the city ordinance, chapter 17, dealing with fireworks.
So the city has a resolution that it would pass from time to time. It would have a sunset clause that would expire every year. With some updates to state law concerning fireworks, Chief Phillips asked me that we change our ordinance to permanently make some of these changes. They're, I guess, consistent going forward. So of the sections that were changed, there's 17-18-C. Paragraph A is essentially just taken directly out of the state law. As I've read through this tonight, though, I think I'm going to eliminate 3 words. It says it's unlawful for any person to sell or offer. I'm just going to eliminate that and say it's unlawful to sell or offer for retail sale, and then go on from there. I think that might make it a little more applicable to everyone.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, because the previous version had said firms, liabilities, corporations, but it is inclusive of all of those entities by, yeah.
So you're not forced
Drones,
to do the recommended site still, right?
Correct. Yeah.
It's still optional, correct?
It's still, yeah, they are recommended, and we changed that section and added a couple additional lots.
I mean, I just, for our family, we light a few sparklers and nothing crazy, and we do it safe on our lawn in the front of the street and put them in water, and everybody's happy.
Not everybody.
I know.
It does have a provision to push you away from structures. Yeah, it said 25 feet.
Right, but that's your setback anyway. So if you're doing it in the street, your setback's that anyway, right?
Yeah.
My question is that enough? That was one of my questions. Is 20 feet enough? And is that the state provision, or is that something we're recommending?
That was taken from our previous resolution.
I saw a house last year. I was watching the fireworks, and a tree caught on fire at their home.
Because they were using the illegal fireworks.
Well, they were out in the street. Yeah. They were out in the street, and they were
using the illegal fireworks.
And you're probably going to still have people use illegal fireworks.
Well, I don't want to lose my right to light sparklers off of my.
No, I'm not saying you can't light sparklers off.
So if these guys, I was there. I wasn't involved, but we was down the street and we ran up there and helped put it out. So, but they were using bottle rockets, which are illegal.
Yeah.
So we went up and helped put the fire out.
Well, I'm fine. I just was wondering if that's enough. That's my only question.
So does this give us the right to ban them altogether if it was serious enough? Is that what the state was trying to change when they went through the legislature? Say if communities, if it was a really horrible dry year or whatever, and we just shouldn't do any altogether, do we have the legal right to say, scratch them all?
I don't think we do we?
There's a process you go through that I think you have to go through the state fire marshal.
Mike Phillips through the state forester. The state law used to say that we had no control over banning them, and now the state law has changed to allow municipalities to be able to ban them. The challenge we had with our areas, like up north, they'll say everything east of 500 east, but the way our town runs, that's really hard to do. So it's really hard to put a boundary to where you would ban them at.
So, Chief, that fire last year, were they cited for that issue, or
which fire? There was
one
18 of them
out in the cove.
Yeah, which one?
Out in the
one
cove.
night.
Out in the cove. I thought you knew which one we were talking about.
Yeah, which one?
Yeah, which one? We went from a whole bunch that we tried to collect information. Chief Shirts, do you know if I can't remember?
Yeah, good.
They were busy in my neighborhood writing citations.
Oh, the law enforcement was out writing citations, but nothing went to court. So,
well, I'm glad that we're putting the enforcement part into this, because I think that's very necessary.
At that point, it gets hard to prove who did it.
Yeah, they don't tend to stick around.
No.
Or they don't admit to it if they are there.
Yeah.
The one other section, just to make sure you're aware of, is under the enforcement section, someone who negligently, recklessly, or intentionally causes a wildland fire may be held liable for all those suppression costs, and that's straight out of state law.
Mm-hmm. And that's reasonable. Absolutely.
It is. Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, this will go on our action agenda. Consider approving a finance agreement with Cellnet Systems, Inc.
So, Extenet is a company, a telecommunication company. It does business all over the Western United States. They have approached the city. They would like the opportunity to use our right-of-ways to be able to put in their infrastructure to start up their business here in our community. So we've gone through and we've put together a franchise agreement. They've had a chance to look at it and they've agreed to the terms. The state of Utah allows a municipality to tax a telecommunication company up to 3.5% of whatever their gross receipts are and what they earn for their services. So it's written with that maximum amount of up to 3.5%. The other essential terms of the agreement is that if they're going to dig up our right-of-way, they have to go through the city process of getting a permit and making sure that's done appropriately. When they repair it, there will be an 18-month warranty period to make sure those repairs are up to city standard. City staff can go in and inspect at any time. If they're planning on putting in some infrastructure that really isn't convenient for the city, we can approach them and we can work that out. If it's put in a place that just won't work, we can require them to remove it. If at any time this franchise agreement ends, the city has the ability to go in and ask them to remove all of their infrastructure as well. It's a non-exclusive agreement and it's for a period of 10 years.
Are they doing wireless? What fiber? What are they doing?
Yeah, so Richard Lee's here from Extenet. He may have some better answers on exactly what they're going to do.
Dude, you should put him there at the start.
Yeah.
So there's a Cedar City file on there.
We should have moved him up to the front of the agenda.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Okay.
Did you draw the short straw to have to sit through all that to get to your thing, or?
You know,
Poor guy.
wireless guys are always at the bottom. And I got to hear a very interesting discussion last night at Midvale that went on way too long. Sorry, back one. So we pursue Richard Lee with Extenet Systems. Full disclosure, I've been on the job 10 days with this company, so I'm at the deep end of the pool. But we are seeking a franchise agreement that facilitates the installation of what's considered, in this case, it is fiber. I don't know if you can enlarge that, but per the legend at the top, everything red is underground, everything blue is above ground, and each of those 8 green dots is what's considered a node. So this is a small cell site. So when you see the 100, 200-foot towers, as you drive down I-15, they're everywhere. If you think of these as infill, known as densification, and so what happens is it's hard to get those large towers to work really well inside the tighter spots in the community. So those 8 nodes will dramatically increase the speed and the capability of the network for you and your constituents.
So when we had this conversation, I don't know, it was maybe 2 years ago with the Verizon folks, the nodes were smaller units, less conspicuous. Is that the same thing?
Same thing. And in fact, this is a collaboration with Verizon.
Oh.
So essentially what you're looking at though is the franchise agreement allows us to go in and use the right of way. We do have to, as the city attorney mentioned, we do have to comply when all is said and done with what your standards are. But once this franchise is in place, we will be coming back and seeking zoning approval, building permits as needed to start the installation of this small network. That is from the very top. That's the Coal Creek is what Verizon calls it.
From there to the bottom is 17.3 miles. That's how long that network will be. We'll install 4 strands of fiber. We typically put in 4 conduits, and we leave one of those open that is for your use. So our 4 strands of, have you ever seen a fiber strand? They're tiny. It's amazing the data these things will transmit. So we're installing 4 of them. Each of those 4 totals 32 strands of fiber. That, I mean, that's an enormous amount of data. My compatriot that works in Southern California, after the installation of this, on his cell phone, he's getting 125 meg per second up and down. I mean, really fast. So it's going to take a little while, you know, for us to go through the permitting and installation process. But ultimately, that's why we're asking for the franchise.
So my cell phone's 4G. So how does that equate to the? I mean, what's
so we're not calling this 5G.
Okay.
Is it knocking on that door? Yeah, absolutely. But technically, it's not 5G.
What's the so from 3 to 4, 4 to 5? What is that? Is it?
So is there anybody sitting here that doesn't have a laptop to use on the net, on a wireless network, a cell phone, a tablet? And we're all living on these devices. And so essentially, if you think of it as, you know, a bigger pipe, we're delivering more data more quickly.
So it's,
how far will it go east-west?
So these small cell networks can be as small as a range is 30 feet to 300. So they're, again, it's infill. It's not, it's, those towers are considered macro. This is micro.
So when you say those blue ones are above ground, what is that? Like,
I can't tell you for sure if we're using city-owned to skip from city-owned poles or Rocky Mountain Power.
Usually telephone poles.
okay. That's why I wondered if they connected in with somebody else's infrastructure or.
Sometimes they do.
So you can share power lines. Does the power interfere with your fiber at all, or?
Well, if we're, so as you've probably experienced, Rocky Mountain Power is their own force to contend with. So in order for us to, if we're using a Rocky Mountain Power tower, we definitely have to jump through their hoops, follow their process, and they're very stringent. So on some of these poles, it may be integrated and the cables go up through, so you won't see exposed cabling or anything like that. But if we're going on a Rocky Mountain Power pole, we have to, we're above ground. We have to follow.
How big is the wire?
Well, it's encased. I couldn't tell you exactly. It's encased in, I want to say it's polyethylene, but I know that's not correct. It's not very big.
So the proximity to electricity doesn't hurt the data transmission?
It's not, well, it's a shielded cable, but so, you know, getting back to if one of those nodes is on a Rocky Mountain Power pole, you know, all those things are taken into account. If we're installing a new pole, you know, typically that's depending on what city ordinance is. The one we were talking about last night is 27 feet. It's fairly slim, but some of those, if this is the pole, over here, we've got a meter. And if that pole is a Rocky Mountain Power pole, it has to be at least 10 feet because we can't impede the ability to climb that pole. And that 10 feet is if a technician is working on top of the Rocky Mountain Power pole and drops a tool, they don't want it to land, and we don't want to land on the power meter that's over here. So in some cases, they can be fully integrated. In others, you'll there will be two separate pieces. You know, on the ground will be a box with a meter that is easily read. So it can't be at ground level. So there's, again, the cart is now well in front of the horse here, but I wanted to give you an idea of why we're seeking a franchise.
Well, yeah, but before we
But we
approve it,
wanna
we
know-
want to know what it's going to look like,
Yeah,
and
right.
what do these nodes look like? How big are they, and what am I going to see when I drive up and down the street?
So if we were installing a new pole, it's slim line. And so again, the one last night was 27 feet. If you think of what's considered, you know what? It looks like that. It's not as pronounced, but if that's the antenna on top of that pole, and that's 27, 30 feet, that's about what you're looking at.
And where does that sit in relationship to the street and the setback and the curb and gutter and all that?
That will depend on exactly where your right of way allows us to put it.
So each section would go through our building department for approval and
yep.
whatnot.
Yeah, and what we'll try to do is a blanket application, because we're doing it all concurrently.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You guys use a lot of boring technology to go under roads and things when you have to with your.
I don't really
cut the roads.
I don't get into that, but if it's possible to bore, I'm sure they will.
Okay.
My only question on this is I'm just wondering about the guarantee on the resurface on the thing. I'm not sure 18 months. It seems like to me we should be looking at 24 months or 36 months. Because a lot can happen. I mean, there's a lot of settling that happens here, and I want to make sure that the city is protected.
Got that. We've had a provision in our streets ordinance for a number of years about anybody cutting the road.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's utility providers or a homeowner or whomever needs to cut the road to get to anything, it has two bonds they have to post. One's a 14-day bond and the other's an 18-month bond. The 14-day bond is intended to make them close the incision within 14 days, close it and repair it.
Mm-hmm.
The 18-month has been our standard for making sure it doesn't fail. Typical warranty periods on new infrastructure, if it was a new road, is 1 year. So 18 months is a little bit longer than that, but not quite 36.
Okay.
Getting people to post a cash bond for 3 years is sometimes problematic. And we don't take surety bonds.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions?
I just have a comment. When I built my home 22 years ago, they had just paved the streets, and the TV company came in and cut across every one of them.
Yep.
And you're to your point, they did settle, and every time you drove up there. And so I hope we are, very strict, and I hope your company does it right when they proper compaction and repairs if they cut through the streets.
Drive down 300 West where I live after the water project 2 or 3 years ago. It's bumpity, 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 bumpity. And we did that.
Most of these companies nowadays do directional drilling, so they won't open cut. Most of their cuts will not be open cut. They'll drill it in.
Yeah, and they did that down on the industrial road last year with fiber, right?
Very little settlement with that.
It was great.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
So we're good with this going on the consent? Yeah. All right. Item number 14, review bid quotes for the installation of the field lights on field 2 and 3 at the Fields of the Hill. A lot of field.
Okay, probably well aware of this one. Fields 2 and 3 are these two north fields up at the Fields of the Hills.
There's no settling. Okay.
These fields were not lit or lights were not installed on these fields when we did the original complex. We just installed them on the two south fields. city went ahead and budgeted money to go ahead and put the lights on these the fields 2 and 3. The lighting equipment was purchased through a contract from Musco, which has provided all our lights on any fields we've put in the last 10 years. They're a very good company. They do everything from the major league fields to Cedar City fields. So, their bid was, their contract was for $232,000 approximately. And their first truck should have showed up about an hour ago. Hopefully he's parked in the right parking lot. We'll see. The second truck will be in tomorrow morning. The light we broke this up into 3 separate bids. Well, actually 4 if you count the lights. The light foundations bid was awarded to, or is proposed to be awarded to Blackburn and Associates for $40,300, and they'll be digging the holes for the foundations to go in. These are precast foundations, and they'll be installing those precast foundations per Musco instructions. The electrical bid is a time and materials bid, because we don't really know exactly what we got up there for the what was left up there when we lit the other 2 fields. So we estimated some hours, and Marshall Evans was a low bid on that for $55,100, but they are only going to get paid for whatever time it takes to run that electrical. And then the pole installation bid is a firm bid from well, no, I'm mistaken on that. That's also a time and materials bid from Construction Steel for approximately $25,000. So that's our recommendation for those bids, and also, well, you've already approved the equipment purchase. So,
Comments, questions?
Get her done.
I think it sounds good. I think we should move ahead on it.
All right, that will go on our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Ron jumped right on that adjournment.
Wade was getting sleepy back there. I thought we better send him home.
Hey, thank you.
Yes. Of course.
Learn more about it.
Maybe I can. All right, thanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I hate going to those. I hate going to big parking lot with 50 million people lighting off stuff.
All right. Hey, thank you. We look forward to seeing what you come up with.
I like going out. Right, if you live there, be the kids, yeah, just keep it simple. Yeah, well, it's serious. I mean, you can't, like, for instance, in the Cove, that green belt that's below Mesa Hills, that caught on fire, it could burn all those houses down.
Oh, that didn't see on fire last year.
Fuckers up above Mesa Hills have got an aerial crap.
Yeah, they light off their share of them.
Do.
But, you know, if you caught that green belt on fire below the Allinsons and all those homes, it'd go up and just burn them all down,
Yeah,
right?
you stuck around for all of it.
Oh,
Huh?
it's bad.
Well, I needed that last one.
Yeah, that's true. I always save the good for the last.
Trying to survive
Trying to survive for what?
I say you got her licked now.
That's fair. Oh, that's very fair. I keep hearing everybody, we can't hire people. We keep trying to hire people to do different things, and we can't hire them.
You run a rake? No, I just kidding. We need parks workers.
We need parks workers. We need CATS drivers. When I drive a CATS bus,
That's what it is. We down on those guys again?
But it is saying they have a hard